This coming January will mark a year since Bill C-92 came into effect to affirm the rights of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis Nation communities to exercise jurisdiction over their children and families. This co-developed legislation is about putting kids first, having fewer children in care, and reuniting more families. To do that, Indigenous communities must be in the driver's seat.
It's no secret that Canada's child welfare system is in a state of crisis, or that it's Indigenous children who are paying the highest price. To this day, no one knows the total number of Indigenous kids in care, or how many have died there.
The bands were threatening the local Children's Aid Society that if social workers came on the reserve, then they were going to shoot them.
Canada's underfunding of First Nations child welfare is well known. But it's not only the federal government that's failing Indigenous children.
And it's frustrating because when you take a kid from a parent, you're taking them because you're supposed to be protecting them, and we're not protecting them.
First Nations child welfare agencies are assuming more and more responsibility over child welfare each year.
I see so much injustice. And many of our children have died.
And the numbers tell us they are repeating the same mistakes with the same deadly consequences.
The only guarantee I can provide you is if you let us look after our own kids, I can guarantee you we can kill them just as good as you're doing it.
APTN Investigates spent 12 days on the road in northwestern Ontario. We wanted to find out why so many Indigenous children keep dying in Canada's child welfare system. What most people might not realize is that more Indigenous children die in connection to First Nations child welfare agencies than those run by the province. Since 2013, 178 Indigenous children have died in the system. Of that number, more than 80% are connected to First Nations child welfare agencies.
Working in the field and hearing all the stories all the time, and I have no idea how to make it stop other than letting people know what actually happens. I've seen it from being in care, and now I'm seeing it from working in the field, and it happens all the time and everywhere.
Autumn Windigo grew up in Ontario's child welfare system as a Crown ward. She was abandoned by her mother when she was only 3 years old. She only recently discovered part of the reason why she was given up.
My mom died in September 2018, and a few months later I had to go through her belongings, and I found court documents, and she brought the person who raped her, who ended up being my father, to court. And it said in that document that I was conceived by rape, and that's why she couldn't look after me. She said every single time she looked at me, it reminded her of that.
Windigo spent her childhood being shuffled from one foster home to the next. 10 different homes over 14 years. A lifetime at the mercy of the child welfare system. It's become an all too familiar story for Indigenous children in Canada, going back generations. Once Windigo aged out of the system, she wanted to give back to her community and help stop the cycle of abuse.
Because I see it happening so much. Like, I was abused and care. Like, I am healed from that. Like, I actually forgave my abuser just so I could move on. But actually, when I went to youth forums, I heard other kids talk about them being abused in homes. There was this one girl who I came in contact with, and she said that she was being abused by her foster dad. And she found out 2 years later that 2 girls came forward and said that they were being abused in the same home. And she was questioning, like, why was I still placed there after 2 kids said it.
Wendigo went to work for Wichitewin Family Services in 2017. Wichitewin is one of 13 First Nations child welfare agencies in Ontario. They provide services to 10 First Nations in the province. She thought she would be able to change the system from the inside. She was wrong.
When Wichitewin was originally created, it was a beautiful thing. Like, you know, like they had the right vision, and we don't know exactly where it went wrong. We just know right now I feel like it's too far back to fix anything.
So how did we get to this point? First Nations child welfare agencies have actually been around for decades. They were a direct response to the residential school era. A political reaction to over 70 years of genocide perpetrated by the church and the federal government. Basically, First Nations had enough of their children dying in a system they had no control over.
The bands were threatening the local Children's Aid Society that if social workers came on the reserve, then they were going to shoot them. And start looking at the issues, and probably to some degree justifiable because of what was happening. Like, whole families were being wiped out and whatnot.
Dennis McPherson saw the impact Canada's child welfare system was having on his people firsthand. He worked for Children's Services in his home community of Couchiching First Nation in Ontario in the early 1980s, and was involved in the early development of Wichitewin and Delico, 2 of the most prominent First Nations child welfare agencies in the province. He still remembers pitching the idea to the provincial government.
Toward the end, the chairman asked me a pretty basic question. If we gave you, the authority to look after your own children, what guarantee could you provide that your kids would actually be looked after? I said, well, the only guarantee I can provide you is if you let us look after your own kids, I can guarantee you we can kill them just as good as you're doing. And certainly when you look at the stats, there were a lot of kids taken into care, whether they were physically killed or emotionally killed or whatever. There was a lot of damage done to them, and we're seeing the impact of that now.
Around that time, the Chiefs of Ontario passed a resolution that said, in part, that we, the Indian nations in Ontario, shall create our own Indian child welfare laws, policies, and programs based on the protection of the family and the preservation of their Indian culture. It was a bold vision. Then came the hard part, implementation.
So those kinds of things coming together from the communities and making the story of how they wanted at the time to address these kinds of issues without any input from one side of the community. And they felt, at that time, that they still had, I guess, the knowledge to reinstill this back in the community itself.
Today, McPherson spends much of his time here at Thunder Bay's Lakehead University, an associate professor in the Department of Indigenous Learning. He sees Wichitewin as a missed opportunity, a unique vision that got lost along the way. On a personal level, how does it feel to see this happening on, I'm guessing these organizations that started off you wanting to help children, now they're actually, responsible for the deaths of children. Personal level, how does that make you feel?
Well, certainly sad. Certainly sad and anxious. And I say that because, I think I had a very clear vision of where they could go, right? And looking at, going back to my own lived experiences, when that I mentioned as far as dealing with the system, right? And being told, well, you're just an Indian, you're not going to amount to anything anyway. Here's the opportunity for just those Indians to come forward and create something that the rest, Canadian society in particular, but probably the rest of the world to a large extent, hadn't seen before.
But according to McPherson, that's not what happened. Today, there are more Indigenous children in the system than at the height of the residential school era. And with more and more kids dying each year, time is of the essence. Coming up after the break.
First Nation agencies are underfunded, but there is still a lot of money that's still put in place where it shouldn't be happening. And when we're paying someone to take care of a kid, when we're screening them, that's why I say sometimes we do more harm of a kid's being in care than they are with their parents.
The high cost of negligence. How does it make you feel to know that this could have been repaired when it was supposed to be repaired, and that nobody bothered to do anything? How does that make you feel?
Really upset. Makes me mad. I don't like it.
When Autumn Wendigo went to work for Wichitawan Family Services in 2017, she wanted to help children victimized by the child welfare system like she was. What she says she experienced instead was an organization in freefall.
First Nation agencies are underfunded, but there is still a lot of money that's still put in place where it shouldn't be happening. And when we're paying someone to take care of a kid, when we're screening them, that's why I say sometimes we do more harm of a kid's being in care than they are with their parents.
Wendigo was a caseworker through one of Wichitawan's community care programs on the Rainy River First Nation. She says staff there were underqualified and often put children's lives at risk. When she brought her concerns forward, she says they were ignored.
You can put a complaint in with Chief and Council, and Chief and Council doesn't do anything. And then you can make a complaint to Wichitawan, and Lori Rose doesn't do anything. Which sucks, because then a kid who is already going through so much, sometimes they might take their own life, or sometimes they might run away, as I say, AWOLing, or not even being seen. Their services aren't being met, which is ultimately leading up to kids, I feel like, to set up for failure.
This is Daniel. It's not his real name. APTN is protecting his identity. He's one of those kids that Autumn Wendigo is talking about, set up for failure by the system.
Oh no, I just get sudden strikes of pain in my back every time I wake up and stuff. And when I'm doing things, I guess. It gets a really sharp pain in my shoulder, and it lasts about a minute. And it's like medium pain. It's not like I broke anything, or it just doesn't feel good.
Daniel is only 15 years old and has been in the care of Wichitawan for most of his life. He has what's known as Sprengel's deformity, a rare congenital defect where one shoulder blade sits higher on the back than the other. Doctors say Sprengel's can be corrected with surgery if identified early enough.
I kind of want it really bad. Make it so my left shoulder feels better, and I could do as much as my right. But I'm not sure. The doctor said that there could be a possibility of it making it worse. So I don't know, I'm just hoping when I get the surgery, it will make it better instead of worse.
Records show medical officials suspected sprangles just before Daniel turned 4 in late October of 2009. But Wachitowin failed to properly follow up with his treatment. Daniel missed years of medical checkups, including a referral to a specialist. Experts say at the age he is now, the risks with surgery are more severe, and there is a chance he can lose what little range of motion he has left altogether.
How does it make you feel to know that this could have been repaired when it was supposed to be repaired, and that nobody bothered to do anything? How does that make you feel?
Really upset. Makes me mad. I don't like it. I know if I was in the situation that they were in to do something, I would do it and not wait many years.
It's broken. It's been broken for quite some time. The directive that was sent by the ministry was written in plain English. There's no way around it. And it appears as though there's been zero compliance. So even after public inquiries, even after investigations, even after the ministry taking a more aggressive stance on these procedural injustices and calls to action, the child welfare agencies in Northern Ontario don't seem to be comprehending the message, if you ask me.
Marco Frangione is a child welfare lawyer based out of Thunder Bay. He represents clients from across northwestern Ontario. Most are First Nations families trying to get access to their children. Many involve customary care agreements.
The way that it's unfolded has been absolutely tragic. I can't count the number of clients who have called me that have advised that they haven't seen their children in many years. They're asking to go back to court. They don't even know where their children are living. Calling something customary does not make it customary. I'm not the one to judge whether or not something is customary or not, but I defer to my clients. And when my clients tell me that they aren't seeing their children, that they aren't being supported, that no plan for reintegration is being put into place, there's nothing customary about that, irrespective of whatever culture you hail from.
Customary care agreements are the cornerstone of most First Nations child welfare agencies, meant to keep Indigenous children connected to their family, culture, and communities. But according to Frangione, the current model is having the opposite effect.
The numbers now, I think, are startling and telling. If we have more children in care today that are First Nation than we did at the height of the residential school era, clearly nothing has changed. Clearly matters are only getting worse.
And some of the deaths of young people who have taken their lives where they were thousands of miles away from home is one example of the injustices that our children face, not only in society in general, but while they are in this institution of the child welfare institution.
Anna Betty Ashni-Peniskam has seen the horrors Indigenous children face in the child welfare system firsthand. A respected child's advocate and former Deputy Grand Chief of the Anishinaabe Nation, she has spent decades pushing for change.
Why is there such a strong resistance for the federal and government to acknowledge and to accept that they have discriminated against Indigenous children? And when that happens, it's not only the Indigenous children that are the collateral damage, it's all society.
But it's not only the federal government that's failing Indigenous children. Of the 178 Indigenous children that have died in Ontario over the last 7 years, more than 80% happened under the care of First Nations child welfare agencies.
The present customary care that exists within certain child welfare agencies you know, we have to look back as to who developed these. And I don't agree with that whole process and procedure, because it wasn't prevention based. To me, like customary care is still foster care, and but my belief is that we need to invest more in prevention and intervention.
Our government is investing $542 million to Indigenous communities to exercise full jurisdiction over child and family services.
Depending on who you talk to, Bill C-92 could be part of the solution or just another part of the problem. The bill, which received royal assent and is now law, affirms the rights and jurisdiction of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people in relation to child and family services.
Wet'suwet'en is failing its families, Delico is failing its families. The numbers of children in care and the number of children that are in these so-called private arrangements is astronomically high, and something needs to be done. If that means slowly and responsibly delegating the authority to the First Nations under the Bill C-92 model, so be it. The implementation for same will take some time. It's going to be a costly and it's going to be a time-consuming endeavor.
APTN Investigates was briefly in contact with Wet'suwet'en Family Services Executive Director Lori Rose. We asked about the accusations of negligence within the agency that are putting children's lives at risk. We gave her many opportunities to comment. She has stopped responding to our various requests.
I see so much injustice. And many of us have been saying this for years and years. And many of our children have died.
As long as we allow ourselves to be implicated in the system, nothing will change, because it's not our system. And when we look at that, the system is broken. No, the system's not broken. The system is operating exactly as it's designed to do. It's put us in a place, i.e. on the fringes, and as long as we are satisfied to stay there, then the system continues to work.
Kids in care really struggle a lot. And I know, growing up in care myself, I'm strong. I am. The stuff that I dealt with and the stuff that I see, it just shouldn't be happening.